There's Lars. Almost ready to start. Half a minute. Good afternoon. We call to order the regular meeting of West Valley City Council. Pursuant to Utah Code, West Valley City has determined that this meeting will be held electronically without an anchor location, given the ongoing novel coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic. West Valley City has determined the pandemic presents a substantial risk to the health and safety of those who may be present at an anchor location. This meeting will be held electronically. Members of the press and public are invited to view this meeting live on YouTube at www.youtube.com/user/WVCTV. We note that we have 6 members of the council present. I believe the 7th will join us shortly. We do have a quorum. And with that, then, we will go to our minutes. We need a motion on the minutes of November 24th.
Make the motion for approval of those minutes, Mayor.
Second.
Property before us, no further comments? Hearing none, then without objection, the minutes will be approved. Hearing no objection, it is unanimous. The minutes are approved as is. We note that our regular meeting for later tonight is canceled. And so we will go right into our communications. We don't have any specific action items on our agenda for next week either. So we'll jump right into the communications. We'll begin with our strategic plan presentation on community and economic development. And since Nicole Cottle has joined us with a video, we can actually see her. I assume that she will be making some introductory comments.
Yes, Mayor. So I would just turn that over to Nicole.
Hey, Council, thank you so much for letting me do this. It's actually, I'm gonna do the presentation this evening. So I'm just gonna share my screen with you and we'll get right to it. Okay. Can everybody see that and hear me?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Okay, so really economic development, community and economic development this year, our report is very straightforward and simple, I feel, because it seems like we're in front of the council every week and Steve Pastrick is with you a lot, so you know most of what's going on and get a weekly bit of FaceTime with us. So I won't belabor our update, but we'll say that it's a year of good news. So we'll start with building inspections, and you're aware of our wonderful building officials and building inspectors. They have remained in the field all year long and have done their inspections, and we still have met our goal of responding to a request for inspection within 24 hours. So our response time is less than that, and we have had the massive amount of inspections this year. One of the things that that took away from that a little bit was the earthquake response in March. You'll remember that we had a lot of damage out west, in particular to a mobile home park. And one of the things I just wanted to highlight was how great the response from our very highly trained and really wonderful inspectors are. They're a really great asset when we have these kinds of things happen, because they're all across the city. So they were able to quickly get facilities inspected and really work hard to make sure we took care of the folks in our manufactured home community that needed that help. And between my department and Lane's department and others, we were able to help those folks in a very short amount of time. We have had a little bit of limited access to construction sites and to homes as we've done our inspections. So my inspectors have been ingenious, and I think that they've come up with some ways to do inspections that actually have been providing a higher level of service to our customers and to the people seeking inspections, and also provide a safe way to do that into the future. So it's probably some of these things will adopt and continue on in the future. Remote video inspections is one of those. And one of the unique things about that is we often have situations where a homeowner may have a water heater or a furnace replaced by a professional provider. And they historically would call for an inspection, and sometimes it would take us a day or two to get those inspected. Now we can do those inspections right while the provider is still on site. They make an appointment by chat. They use their phone and inspect the things that we need to look at right there over video, and it works really wonderful. So it's great for the provider of the service, really great for the homeowner, and really a time-saving thing for our inspectors as well. It's been a benefit to these changes. Some of the other things that we're working towards for future inspection methods that we think actually are very helpful on some of our taller buildings and more difficult buildings to inspect will be the drone inspections and the other technologies that we hope to employ along the lines of the video inspections. So we don't feel like there's any difficulty or that we can't see what we need to see or do an adequate inspection, and in fact provides a higher level of service. We've been very happy with that, and my inspectors have been so quick to adapt to that. It's really remarkable and very ingenious. We also have a lot of building happening. You heard me mention that. You can see the year-over-year numbers. Construction valuation is a good way to determine that. You see the 236 million here, just slightly less than 2019. Building permit fees about the same as 2019. Total permits slightly higher than we did in 2019, and new dwelling units more than we had in 2019 at 102. So what these numbers demonstrate to me is, again, it's been a very busy year. And one of the things you'll remember early on was concern about continuing to provide for building inspections and developer services. There was a great deal of concern about that at the legislative level and also just with our building community. And so we didn't miss a beat, and they've been right out doing their thing. Very proud of them, and they've also been very cautious and careful as they've done that. So it's worked really well. As we get to economic development, also a very busy year for my economic development team. One of the most important things that we did during this time was we wanted to make sure that any CARES Act money or any assistance that the city might provide was really detailed and dialed in so that it really helped the businesses. And early on, especially right after the closures and then with the earthquake, we had many of our businesses who said to us, please stop calling us. You're calling too often. We're really busy. We need some time. We'll call you if we need you. And so I thought that was a good sign of our really effective and overwhelming outreach to them. We did understand day by day what was going on with our businesses, both big and small, and have kept up those very close conversations with them. So we know what kind of help they need, what kind of problems they were having with various applications for grant funding, what other concerns and issues they had as the pandemic had gone on. And I will add that we have appreciated as an economic development team the wonderful partnerships that we've had with those businesses. There were many days and weeks where we really relied on them to give us information about what was going on in the field and what was happening with their sales and with their businesses. And they were so generous with us to share that information, share that on a very routine basis. And that helped us monitor what was happening and where we could help and be of assistance, and where we needed to back away and let the process work. So it's been a really great thing for our businesses and for us as well. We've made lots of good additional partnerships there. Just quickly, you see our performance metrics here. You're very familiar with these. We've exceeded in every column. You see the big $336 million number in red there in new capital investments. That's a new all-time high, very, very significant for this year. Some of our biggest projects have come online this year, and that's where that number is related to. And so even though it's been a really strange and interesting year for everyone, it's been a successful year for the economic development team and for the city as well. On planning and zoning, this one is fun, and this is what I referred to before. We wanted to really look back and see how many times outside of a normal application process that our wonderful planning team has presented to the council. So interestingly, 62 what we're calling extra presentations to the council occurred over this year. And so, like I said, we've been in front of you a lot, mostly Steve Pastrick, and kudos to him. What a wonderful job he does. And as you know, he's always so highly prepared, and that takes a lot of work and effort. And we appreciate he and his team to make sure you have all the things you need and all the information you need to make your decisions. And we were surprised to see that number, but appreciate being in front of you. Still a hefty number of land use applications in the pipeline both, and what we've seen this year. We also, as you'll recall, had started doing some ALJ cases in our department. And so because of COVID, that was a little bit different, and we were in transition. So you see 19 here, but our clip will be equal to the last year as well as we get going. And then in addition, you see the other reviews that we do and some of the proactive enforcement cases in planning and zoning. And the other things that have been unique about the planning and zoning participation this year is we have several Spanish speakers who have really impeccable and beautiful Spanish skills and have really stepped up when we have been in times of need and crisis, both during the earthquake and otherwise. Ricardo in particular in my department really went the extra mile during the earthquake and really put the minds at ease of folks who needed to hear the information in Spanish and understand it. And he did that at all hours of the day and night. And kudos to him. We've also had many pieces of information that needed to be translated. And as you go through that process, you have a lot of people participating in that. And we have several people in my department that were able to help with that as well. So been a very busy year, but very great year. And I also sent to you by email a document regarding Operation My Hometown, and I can answer any questions you have about that as well.
Okay, council, any questions or comments?
Easy.
Keep up the good work. Thanks for all you do.
Yeah, we'll let you off easy this time. It's the holiday season, so
Yeah, very good.
we're all worried about Santa Claus coming, so we're trying to be extra nice.
There we go. And in a couple of weeks, I do the legislative prep meeting, so maybe we'll have the hard questions there. We sure appreciate it. We sure all of my team loves working for this wonderful city. So thank you so much for the opportunity, and I'll turn it to the next guy in line.
Yeah, the next one is community preservation. And someone no, I was just looking to see if anyone popped on. There we go, city manager.
All right, I believe I am unmuted. If not, I'm sure I'll hear on that pretty soon. Council, it's a great chance to meet with you and review the Community Preservation Department activities, what we've been up to the last year. I will get right to it. I decided we'd start with Animal Services. Animal Services is probably the division in my department that's been most affected by the pandemic. It's as you've noticed, if you've been in the shelter, it's an area where the officers, the technicians, the clerks all mix in close proximity with the animals and with the public. And so we've had to make a lot of different adjustments in the way we operate, in the hours, and how we bring people in, how we keep ourselves and the general public safe. And that's resulted in some different changes. One of the things that's very positive is we've had the chance to focus on licensing. And you see that bump for the current year. That occurs when we have clerks who are working remotely and have the chance to get on their computer and stay on their computer and do all of the follow-up and kind of the prodding that goes along with getting people to license their animals. So we're happy to see that go the right direction. When it comes to just the animals themselves, if I start out with cats, as you can see from slide here, the thing that we've noticed most is our adoptions are down on cats. That's not just because they're cats. It's just you don't have as many people coming in, and the intake has also dropped there. And so we've worked with our partners. Our officers have been really diligent on any chance they get to return a cat rather than process it through the shelter. They've taken that opportunity to try and alter things to keep themselves and the general public as well as the animals safe. As far as dogs,
Lane, could I ask a quick question?
certainly.
Under euthanized, we've got the total euthanized and then owner requested. Are they separate numbers or are the owner requested part of the total?
No, they're separate numbers.
So we euthanized 116 and then had 28 owners besides that.
That's right. People have come in for one reason or another. You know, if it's anything other than a health reason, then we don't do it. So the 28 would be an animal that's compromised in some way.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. And so you can see with the dogs also, those numbers are slightly down. The intake is actually went up, but the adoptions were down where we are normally at. But we did get quite a few more dogs returned to owner. Those would typically be dogs that are licensed or tagged, and we have a way to contact them. So that's just how it's rolled out this year. We're hoping to bump those numbers up as soon as the pandemic is over. So that's about all I've got for animals. I'll move on to our code. This has been a great year for code compliance. We noticed early on in the pandemic that when people stayed home, so many people, I guess, looked around and decided they'd invest some time and some effort into their yards. The ordinance enforcement officers all mentioned how they noticed that was a noticeable difference in their beat without them having to send out a lot of notices in that regard. So when we did the survey this year, we were also surprised that trend seems to have continued through the spring and the summer. So the level of code non-compliance was actually 11.7, which we haven't been that low for quite a while. So that's a tribute both to the community taking an interest in improving their immediate surroundings, and we've got a really good crew of code enforcement officers who are diligent and out there reminding people of ordinances and getting them to comply. So it's been a great year for code enforcement. We're hoping to continue that into the coming year. And last, just like like to spend just a couple of minutes talking about grants. You could see our amount. I would refer you back to 2008. If you look at the year 2008, you see that there's a bump there. About $200,000 of that was recovery money from the last recession. And so I added it on there, but it was a separate pot of money. The recovery money, CARES money for this year, I just made it a new column. Instead of being 25% like the recovery money was, we really doubled the amount of CDBG dollars that we have received. That came in a form of 3 different stimulus packages that made it through Congress for a total of over $1 million. So that will be our challenge over the next couple of years, is to spend that money. Not only is it CDBG money, but because it's CARES money, there are additional restrictions. So spending that money will be a challenge. We've gotten started on it, and hopefully we get there. So if I can just review some of the things we've done with that grant money. I split this out into really 3 different areas. Our ongoing operations, which you all are very familiar with, the programs we run. Those occur all over the city. You can see the dollars we spent there. And then the special projects, which was kind of a combination of our grant money and some funding that we raised from different community partners who were generous enough to donate to the earthquake project. We were able to get some of those homes, all the homes that were off foundations back set. And then the last area was the My Hometown project that Nicole has talked to you about multiple times. I believe we've spent of our CDBG dollars approximately $30,000 on that right now, and I think we'll end up spending a good chunk of that CARES money on My Hometown and the rest of these things. That really concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions anybody's got.
Council? Boy, sounds like another quiet evening. Well, thank you. Appreciate your information. And we have another communication. This one will be fast food establishments with drive-up windows.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to share my screen here.
Okay.
So we wanted to bring really just a discussion item to the council and discuss this particular use, which in the ordinance is referred to fast food establishments with drive-up windows. And first of all, explain why we want to discuss this. So we do get frequent inquiries about developing new fast food establishments that have drive-up windows in areas where they're not allowed. And because of the pandemic, we've seen restaurants that don't have drive-up windows struggle. In fact, some have tried to make, in some ways, a makeshift type drive up in the parking lot or a way to facilitate takeout in a more efficient way because of the pandemic. And we're also seeing restaurants that in the past have not had drive-up windows wanting to now add drive-up windows and ones that you typically wouldn't associate with drive-ups. So as a reminder, just as far as what our current regulations are, so we do have 4 zones that allow fast food establishments with drive-up windows, and those zones are the C2, C3, M, and MXD, or mixed use zones. But then we also have what are referred to as overlay zones. And in these overlay zones, which I'll highlight here shortly, there are restrictions that either just prohibit fast food establishments with drive-up windows altogether or place restrictions on them. So to help the council visualize where these uses are currently allowed and where there's restrictions. So I mentioned there's the 4 zones where those uses are allowed, and that's the C2, which is highlighted in red on this map, the zoning. C3, which is the brown. There's really not a lot of that zone in the city. Then you have the M zone, which is the dark gray on the map. And then you have just really one area, which is the mixed use along 33rd South, just west of the river. You'll also notice there's some areas outlined in blue, and those are the 3 overlay zones where either the fast food with drive-ups are prohibited altogether, or there's some limitations on them. So to provide a little bit of history for the council, so you have those 3 overlay zones I mentioned. The one on 5600 West was first adopted in 2004, and at the time it actually prohibited fast foods with drive-ups altogether. However, it was amended in 2012 so that you could have a fast food business with a drive-up if it was in a multi-tenant building and they had to meet certain conditions for screening of the drive-up. Then with the other 2 overlay zones, the Decker Lake Station overlay zone is the area around the Maverick Center. That one was put in place in '96, so it's been in place for many years, and that one just prohibits the use outright. And then also the Jordan River overlay zone, which is on both sides of 33rd South as you first come into the city. And that's been in place since '98, and it also prohibits fast food restaurants with drive-up windows outright. So to provide a little bit more detail here, so this map is the area along 5600 West between 35th South and 3100 South. So you can see in the top right is the Centennial Park and the fitness center. Then the top, more to the top left, you have the Walmart there on 5600 West, just to orient you. So this area actually is not impacted by the overlay zone. So the overlay zone on 5600 West goes between 31st South up to 21st South. And where I included this map is I think it illustrates why years ago the council imposed the overlay zone, because you had such a high concentration of fast food establishments with drive-through windows in the areas centered around 35th South. Now, some of these have come after the overlay. Again, it doesn't apply to this section, but I believe this was part of the reason why the council years ago first adopted an overlay zone on 5600 West. This next map here, now this area shows between 31st South and just north of where you have the Winco and Target, so roughly 2500 South. And so here you can see you've got fast food establishments that are set back off the street, so the overlay zone applies to the first 250 feet, or you have fast food establishments that are in multi-tenant buildings. So that kind of gives you an idea of, in this case, they're a little more dispersed and not, in some cases, not right on the street. Now, some of these predated the overlay zone.
Steve, may I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Did we end up changing and allowing there was a restaurant that was in a multi-tenant building across the street from Duncan over in the Winco parking lot?
Right.
Did we allow them to have a drive-through?
So the Popeyes you can see in this map, so they're actually outside of the overlay zone, as well as, for example, on the east side, the Kneaders is outside. So it applies to the first 250 feet on both sides of the street. So once you get out of that 250 feet, then there's no restriction.
So we did not end up changing and allowing that one business in that strip mall that has the Hawaiian food?
So we do allow in a multi-tenant building, even if it's
Okay.
within the 250 feet, they can have a drive up. I know that you're referring to the building just north of the Maverick.
Yes.
Yeah, so so it's possible for them to have a drive up, but that particular building does not.
Okay. So when they came, we didn't allow it, I guess.
Yeah, and I don't recall the exact timing on that, but
Yeah.
know that at least as of right now, they don't have a drive up.
So Dunkin' Donuts is gone. And I couldn't tell if they're taking out that drive up or not. Would that drive
No,
up?
Cafe Rio has the drive up now.
They took it. Did they take over the whole building
Wait.
then?
No, but they moved the drive up down to their end.
Okay.
I was in it yesterday.
Okay. That's what I didn't know, if it went with the building or the property owner or who it went with. Okay.
Right. Yeah. So they can. That's one where where it's a multi-tenant. They were able to do that, and Cafe Rio is one of those examples where when they first started, they didn't do drive ups, but now pretty much all their new locations have drive ups.
Okay. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. This next image shows the area that's the Decker Lake Station overlay zone. So again, around the Maverick Center. So here's an area that where fast food with drive ups are prohibited outright. And then finally, the last area where the fast food establishments with drive-up windows are prohibited is the Jordan River Overlay Zone, which is this last slide where you can see the area that's outlined in blue. And so, again, we as staff just really wanted to share this information with the council. We're not proposing a change to the code. We just wanted to let you know of these changing conditions, that these overlay zones have been in place now in some cases for about 25 years or less, depending on the location. And because of the pandemic, we are seeing some shifts in the industry for restaurants. And so just, again, wanted to bring that to the council's attention and see if it warrants further discussion or potential, changes to the code, or if the council feels we should stay the course here.
I personally think we should just stay the course.
I have a couple of thoughts on this. The first is, I'm not sure that we should make long-term or sweeping changes based upon the pandemic. Now, it may be that pandemic behavior becomes the norm for 20, 30, 40 years into the future, and people never want to go sit down in a restaurant again. I don't know. But 9 months in, I'm not sure that we want to make changes because of that, unless they're of some sort of temporary nature. But I can't see somebody constructing a drive-through with a year permit to have it open. It just is too much expense. But my other thought is, I don't know why we prohibited drive-throughs in the first place, except to discourage those types of fast food restaurants and encourage more higher end sit down restaurants. Now, there may be reasons that are eluding me at this moment, but it seems like we were just looking at 56 West and other places where that's all we could get in the city was fast food drive-through type restaurants, and we wanted more sit-down restaurants. We didn't want to prohibit restaurants. So the drawing line was, or the limitation was, well, if these are restaurants that insist on having a drive-through, they won't build here. We have enough of those, and somebody else will bring a different restaurant in. That's my recollection anyway. Now I don't know if that reason's valid anymore.
Well, Steve, you raised some interesting thoughts. I know during the pandemic, I certainly don't want to change the basic concept of, encouraging more sit-down restaurants and not changing the fast food kind of things to allow them to proliferate. We have plenty of those. But what about a restaurant that is a typical sit-down restaurant? That's their main business. But to enable them to compete in this new environment, they want to have a drive-up window. I know some of them have home delivery, but if they had a drive-up window, that would be more convenient. What would the problem be if the main business was a sit-down restaurant and it maintained that as its main business, from allowing them to have a drive-up window as well?
And I think we're saying the same thing as we've got, at Olive Garden, they're delivering out to the parking lot, or maybe Chili's is, or other places. We don't have a whole lot of what I might term high-end sit-down restaurants, but those we have, they're trying to deliver because they're trying to stay in business. And I guess the concern was at one point, if we allow every restaurant to have a drive-through, all we'll have are drive-throughs. And that may still be a valid concern, but I don't know.
Well,
So
is there
mo-
any way? Oh, go ahead, Councilwoman Lang.
Well, I was just going to say, at pretty much all of these drive-throughs, they have sit-down areas. So I do know that we learned the hard way from the Wendy's and the Carl Jr.'s and those that are up against houses or near houses, that because the drive-up windows go so late into the night, their order boards are noisy, their extra lighting is an intrusion on those homes. I know that when a lot of these were put in, that was some of the problems that we had with putting them too close to home. So, having them have, and just the look of them, that's why we had that they need to be screened. And then we've tried keeping them, I think, a little bit further from home so that doesn't annoy the residents that have been living there for 40 years.
And I would support keeping them however many feet, 200 feet, 250 feet away from homes for any new build. But, I'm looking at the Olive Garden and just wondering, that's not going to interfere with anybody. They're a busy, successful restaurant in West Valley trying to stay in business. Why would we prohibit them? And I don't know, though, if they would want to stay in that model 2 or 3 years from now anyway. But I mean, there's a lot of uncertainty with this.
I think, Steve, too, one of the things is the type of menu. Cafe Rio, for example, has had takeout available from the start. They didn't have a drive up, but they had takeout available. You could walk in, you could order it through the walk-in and take it home. And so they had meals and serving that was designed for takeout. Olive Garden doesn't. And so, they've had to kind of modify their menu a little bit to be able to deliver it out to the parking lot. But I think they've adapted to that. I don't think it's hurt them as much as some others, but it's the clientele they go to also. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I know that we've gotten takeout from Olive Garden for 5 years when we have too big of a party and we just want to have it at the house. So I know they've had it with their menu, but I know they've had to ramp up a lot more of what they're doing that way.
Yeah. And, I think, as I say, I don't think it's hurt their bottom line during this last 9 months. So I don't see any reason to change the regulations that we have right now.
Well, I think for businesses, for restaurants, the issue comes down to how do they remain in business, how they stay competitive. And I'm sure you noted during the pandemic, if you drive around, that those that have drive-up windows, there were big, long lines at them. In fact, sometimes they created traffic problems. But for others, and especially sit-down restaurants, even those that had takeout, that wasn't the situation. And some of those had a hard time staying in business. Is there any way we could find to do a drive-up window for a restaurant that is a traditional sit-down restaurant without changing the requirements significantly of what we're already doing to allow them to stay competitive?
You kind of have to look at the restaurant too. Many locations right now don't yield themselves to a drive-through area. The one Cafe Rio that has a drive-through right now, that drive-through was there for Dunkin' Donuts, so it had the drive-through the lane to go there. They just adapted it back to theirs. Their former location farther up the street, you couldn't have put a drive-through in because it was, right on the street and right up. You'd have to take out a building to put a drive-through in. So I think it depends on the restaurant too.
Well, there's nothing we can do if the design of the location, the footprint, if you will, of the building and that, there's nothing we can change for there. But is there anything we could do? My goal is not to relax the standards such to the point that we start having all fast food drive-through restaurants. But if a sit-down restaurant maintains its original business as a full-service restaurant, not just sit down, but a full service, could we allow them to add a drive-up window? Many of, or some of them anyway, already do takeout, but the drive-up window would help them to remain more competitive.
And I think that has to be a case by case. We can't, I don't think we can design a regulation that would cover every aspect. So I think we just have to do case by case.
Well, how do you do case by
variances.
case?
Yeah, we can't.
If the restaurant comes to us and asks for a variance, and we examine that through the Planning Commission and Board of Adjustment and things like that, as just as we do now with variances.
I think you'd have to say.
Go ahead.
I think you'd have to say that, in this overlay zone, you could only have a drive-through if, 80% of your business is sit down. But I don't know how we enforce that. I don't know how, what do they have to close the drive-through at 8:00 because they exceeded their limits or something else. Maybe we could get some examples from Steve Pastrick as to, the problem this is causing certain people. And I don't know that I'm seeing, he's hearing from people, hey, we need help. And I haven't heard who he's hearing from or how that would help.
Sorry. Yeah.
Well, the other thing is this going to open us up to the grocery store saying we need to drive up for the groceries now because nobody wants to come in. And, there's grocery stores that have delivery and you just pull up to certain parking stalls in the parking lot and they bring it to you. But, how many more businesses is this going to affect that they say, well, if you bent the rules for these guys so that their job's easier, are we going to be putting these on all kinds of businesses and not just fast food and restaurants? If it's just for COVID, I think we need to wait and make sure if it's a long-term need or if it's just a knee-jerk reaction. And I think the places that we don't allow, I don't think we should allow drive up in the future anyway, so.
And I agree, Karen, that if it's just for COVID, we don't want to change all of the rules. But I'm not sure why we wouldn't allow the grocery store to have drive-through. Harmon's does, but then the Smith's doesn't, or the Walmart doesn't. It has designated spots where you pull up and they'll bring it out to you. I don't know why we wouldn't allow Home Depot to have a drive-through. You can go through and pick up whatever you need if you've ordered it ahead and not have to get out of your car. I don't know why drive-through is necessarily bad. I think the reason we had these overlay zones was so that we would discourage your McDonald's and your Wendy's and your Arby's and get something else. And I don't know that we've been tremendously successful in the getting something else. But now if we have the something else and they need a drive-through to stay alive long term, not just because of COVID, but because that's the way people are going to use those restaurants now, maybe we do need to examine it.
If I could maybe chime in, we did see interest from restaurants before the pandemic in wanting to have drive-up windows. It's just that the pandemic has really accelerated that. And one or another example that's changed in the industry or just restaurant industry more broadly since some of these overlays were put in place was the creation of what are called quick service restaurants or fast casual restaurants. So your Cafe Rios and your Zupas that are sort of like in the middle between a sit-down restaurant and a traditional fast food restaurant. And so that kind of blurred the line a little bit when it came to what category do those fit into.
I wonder, I think I'm sure at this point, I know I don't have enough information. I would like to see what's happening in the industry in other areas, not just Utah, but what's going. Because as I look at this, I say, how much control do we want to exercise? I mean, we allow dry cleaners drive-through. We allow pharmacies drive-through. I mean, there's many of those. How much do we want to say you can't have a drive-through for this industry or for this type of restaurant, but others you do? What's the driving reason behind those? I'm not necessarily saying I'm a fan of drive-throughs, although I have very much appreciated it with restaurants during COVID-19, but I've always appreciated it for pharmacies and for dry cleaners. I mean, that's always been, that was well before COVID-19.
Banks.
Yeah, banks, yeah, very much so.
So if I, again, could chime in, my recollection just from when these overlay zones were put in place years ago, one was, as Councilman Bueller mentioned, was to try to encourage more sit-down restaurants in addition to fast food. But then also, like in the case of 5600 West, was just to encourage other businesses other than, because we had that stretch along 56 where it was just one right after the other of just all fast food. So just trying to encourage other businesses just more broadly.
Okay, when you say that, then I say, okay, wait a minute. Then why don't we control that issue? I mean, we control how many of certain businesses are in an area. You could control that as well. And why can't we attract more sit-down restaurants? And what could we do to attract more full service restaurants, I think they're called, where people come and wait on you at the table and etc. The industry is changing, and like Steve was saying, it's getting blurry, because even a fast food restaurant, you order at the counter, but they will actually serve you at the table, but they're not considered a full service restaurant. So I think it's changing. And at the very minimum, I think we need to re-examine how we define things to ensure that it meets what we want to do in the future. One, to encourage more full service restaurants. Two, to discourage having a lot of fast food restaurants in a small location, a high concentration of them. And should we also apply that to even full service restaurants? I don't have the answers to those, but I would like to have those kind of investigated and say, you know, how do we deal with what's changed in the industry?
I think, Mayor, the question of how do we bring in more full service restaurants isn't necessarily answered by prohibiting fast food restaurants. So maybe we just need to have a fresh look at that, and that could then drive, if that's the policy, that could then drive our ordinances.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know. How much do we try and influence the market? Because if the market is mostly fast food restaurants and people want a whole bunch of them in one location, like at a mall, you know, at the mall, they've got a whole bunch of them there at the food court.
Right. But they don't have a drive-through yet.
That's true. That's true.
There's a hot dog on the stick at the mall, and there's one on 35th South that is a drive-through. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, the one thing I do know is based on the information we currently have, I'm not ready to make any changes, but I do think it needs to be examined more and maybe find out what's happening in the restaurant industry and where things are going.
Agreed.
Not just in Utah, but even in other areas of the country. And how do you differentiate between what's considered a fast food? Because during the pandemic, some of those fast food places, and I was at one of them, and within the last couple weeks, as far as fast food, I thought it was faster if I would have gone in and sat down and ordered off a menu.
Right. I don't know that we can define it into 1, 2, or even 3 categories. You go to a Sizzler and they're cooking a steak for you and they have a salad bar, and you wouldn't think that was fast food, but you still stand up in a line to order at the counter.
Yeah. I would like some better definitions of what's what. Okay, now, Mr. Pastrick, we've given you some general feedback. Is anyone opposed to getting more information? I'm not proposing any changes, but I don't know if we should change or not, because I don't have the information that would drive that. Because the only thing we have right now is some people requested it even before COVID-19, and they certainly requested it after. And I need more than that. Any comments to that?
Agreed.
I would agree.
Okay. I really think we need to examine the definitions of restaurants and what that means. I'm not saying we should change anything, but let's just figure that out.
And we may want to talk to the industry and find their definition of what a restaurant and fast food and the full service and everything is too, and go from there.
Yeah, the Utah Restaurant Association would certainly be key to that. I know I've interacted with them in some other issues with the county, and there's probably more than one of those.
Yeah, I know I saw a History Channel presentation about the food industry and how it progressed in the Depression and into World War II, and it was interesting how some of those fast food restaurants developed.
Yeah.
So,
well, it's almost now like, it's kind of like the state had to define the difference between a restaurant and a bar, and
right.
And they finally made them post a notice so that
Yeah.
it would be clear, because no one knows.
We are this and we are that.
Yeah. Maybe we can have them post a sign say, "We are a fast food restaurant."
Come in and sit down.
Service.
Hmm?
I don't know. Maybe then, unless Wayne has any comments to chime in here, can you take that and kind of get us some more information?
Yeah, sure, Mayor. I don't have any further comments I need to add. I think we're good. We can
Okay.
go get further definitions of restaurants, checking the industry, all that. That'll be fine.
Okay. Yeah, if there's trends that are already happening and across the country, maybe that would be helpful. Okay. Thank you. All right. If there's nothing further there,
No, sir. Thank you.
didn't hear anything from the council. So let's see, council calendar. I think I would comment only on the calendar for December. I was asking about that. December has a 5th Tuesday, which is the 29th. We're not scheduling a council meeting then, of course, but we're currently not scheduling one on the 22nd, which is the Tuesday before Christmas. And looking at this meeting that we just had, we're not scheduling a regular council meeting tomorrow or next week. I guess on the 8th. But we will still have our study meeting.
That leaves us the 15th, so, or the 13th, so, or no, the 15th. So we'll have to do whatever we do on the 15th. Right?
Well, I know that we have scheduled for the 15th. I asked that of Wayne before. We're doing these strategic plan presentations from the departments, and he's trying to schedule, I think, 2 of them in each meeting, and there are 2 scheduled for the 8th and 2 for the 15th. Is that right, Wayne?
Yes, that's correct.
And I know we have more than that, a few more after that in January, but I would not be opposed. But I want your feedback, since we don't have a lot on our calendar. Should we do 3 instead of 2 at our meetings, like next week?
Sure, I think we could fill up the time that we've allotted.
So Mayor, after you and I had that discussion this afternoon, I went back and kind of checked the situation, and the problem we have with scheduling another one for next week is that presentation would have to be really pretty much done today, because we have to schedule them for tomorrow for next week's, or we don't have to, but that's how our normal schedule is, to get them approved tomorrow for the agenda, post the agenda, have the council look at it and all that. Plus for me to have a chance to look at the presentation as well in my normal course. So there's a possibility we could get an extra one on there, but I just didn't want to promise you anything. I just wanted to let you know.
Well, do what you can.
Okay.
Just, it's an option. If it works, fine. If it doesn't, we'll just stick with the 2. I think the 15th, there was some other items on the agenda.
Yeah, there were 2 other items as well. Not resolutions or ordinances, like you said, there's no regular meeting, but there was another communications item or 2.
Yeah. Okay. If you can, fine. If not, we'll stick with the 2.
Okay.
Anything else on the calendar? Then potential future agenda items. Council reports. I would mention one item. They invited me and they said they would be very conscious of social distancing, etc. And they were. I went to the ribbon cutting at Hunter High School for the addition, and very nice facility. more classrooms. It wasn't just the addition of new classrooms and conference rooms, meeting rooms. They also did some work on their athletic field, a new small building out there. And then they did some redesign of some of the offices, etc., within the building to make that more efficient. So, but that's all. It fits right in. What other ones? I guess I should have looked. No, I think that was the only one. It was a quiet week because of Thanksgiving. Hearing no further comments, there's no need for a closed session. And I reiterate, we will not have a regular city council meeting at 6:30. It's been officially canceled and noticed out to the public. So unless anyone has any questions or comments, we're done.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn without objection. We will stand adjourned. Hearing no objections, that passes unanimously. We're adjourned. Stay safe.